Former Congressman Allen West, do you miss being in Congress?
You know, the thing is about serving the people. That's what I've done my entire life through the military and then being a congressman. It's some of the chicanery that goes on inside the institution that I can do without.
Would you ever consider running again?
You know, that's up to God. And I think that it's so important that you're obedient to His will. You know, recently I just moved out to Dallas, Texas to be the president and CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis. And who would have ever thought that after I came out to speak to them last September that they would offer me that incredible position of a 31-year-old conservative policy center. And so I think that you have to listen for that still quiet voice.
What's the focus of that policy center?
There are several different focuses. It's tax policy, retirement, pension policy, health care, education, energy, and national security policy. Since they got an old paratrooper out there now, we can delve into that a little bit more, which I think national security is becoming a lot more prominent issue for the American people.
Well, what's the advantage or disadvantage of being located in Dallas and being a national policy?
I think the great advantage is that we're not inside the Beltway, and so we're not jaded by a lot of the political machinations that go on there. And like I like to say that we're part of the Waffle House crowd, because a lot of these things with policy solutions, you can talk in the world of think tanks and talk in the academic world, but you have to get the everyday American citizen to be able to understand so they can make the right decision when it comes to our electoral process.
Well, we invited you on Book TV to talk about this, which is Guardian of the Republic.
Yeah.
Your book, autobiography, would you say?
I would say it's a philosophical biography. You know, what is it that makes me who I am today?
Quite a title.
Well, you know, when you come from a dad who served in World War II, an older brother who served in Vietnam, and then myself, and now my nephew, who is a young major in the Army as well, I think it's appropriate, because that's what our family has been, guardians of this republic.
Who were Snooks and Buck?
Well, those were the nicknames for Mom and Dad, Buck West and Snooks West, and they were just an incredible mother and father, and it just wasn't, you know, what they were able to do for us three boys, Herman Sr., and then also Arlen, the youngest, but it was for the extended family and the examples that they set, and that's what I try to honor and lift for today.
What kind of work did they do? What was their life like?
Well, they were simple people. We were a lower middle income family. We grew up 651 Kennesaw Avenue, which is the old 4th Ward neighborhood in Atlanta, Georgia. As a matter of fact, it's the same neighborhood that Dr. King was born and raised in. Ebenezer Baptist Church is there. And so my elementary school was right across from where Dr. King's final resting place. So it had an incredible impact upon me. But Dad, after they moved up to Atlanta, he was a nursing assistant at the Veterans Administration Hospital. And my mother, even though she was not in the military, she might as well have been, she was a civilian worker with the 6th Marine Corps District Headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia.
What got you into the military?
Just like I said, when you have a dad that served in World War II and sitting down and hearing the stories that he shared with you as a little boy, and then also my older brother who served in Vietnam as a Marine infantryman, and I'll never forget the time on an Easter that he sent back a little replica of a Marine dress uniform for me to wear to church, and I was so proud to do that. And the day that my older brother and my dad sat down with me and said that they wanted me to be the first officer in the family, because Dad had been a corporal, my brother had been a lance corporal, and so I started in 1976 at high school junior ROTC at Henry Grady High School in the 10th grade, and went on to ROTC in Tennessee, and then got my commission in 1982, and the rest, as they say, is history.
How many service stations did you have across?
13 different countries, 3 different combat zones, and so, you know, 3rd or 4th generations in our family that has served in combat for this great nation.
Allen West, you talk about what happened in Iraq in your book, Guardian of the Republic. What was that situation?
Well, look, you know, my father and my older brother told me that the most important responsibility for a commanding officer is to take care of your men, especially in combat, and for them to know that you have a genuine care and concern for them, because they'll go out and they'll achieve any mission. And so when word was out that there were an increase of threats against my unit, and then there was even a threat personally against me as the commander, we found out that there was an Iraqi police officer that was leaking some information, and he was not forthcoming with the people that we had assigned to us two females. And if you know the culture over there, they're not going to be very compliant. And so I made a decision to use what I call a psychological intimidation tactic. And I threatened the guy, and I fired my service 9mm Beretta over his head. And then I went and reported that to my commanding officer, and I told him we had learned.
Did you get results from that?
The amount of the attacks did go down, and that was the most important thing for me, was to make sure that those roadside bombs and ambushes, those were not as occurring as much as we had seen that recent spike. There are some people that said, you know, it was just part of the normal cycle, but you talk to the soldiers on the ground, and they know what happened and what went on over there. But again, the most important thing is that you should be willing to lay down your life or put your career on the line for those men who have been called to serve with you in a combat zone, and that's the most important thing for a commander. You know, it may be unrealistic, but you know, I made a promise to the parents and to the spouses and to the children that I would do everything possible to bring their husbands back to them safely.
Would you do it again?
Absolutely.
How'd you get to Congress?
It was interesting. I was actually a civilian military advisor to the Afghan army down in Kandahar. And in 2006, you had the change in Congress where the Democrats had won. And I got a phone call and an email, actually, from a woman who worked in politics, Donna Brossamer. And we had a meeting when I had one of those little 10-day breaks from Afghanistan. And she talked to me about running for Congress. And, of course, I told her, look, I'm in southern Afghanistan. The most important thing for me is to stay alive dealing with the Taliban. But what she's told me was something that is so important. She said, just because you retire from the military and you hang up your uniform does not mean that the oath that you took to support and defend the Constitution has ended. And, you know, that was very, very forthright for me. And so I saw, serving and running for Congress is just a continuation of the service that I've given this country in uniform.
In your book, Guardian of the Republic, you talk about being born in 1961 and something that happened in Fort Lauderdale that year.
Yes, it was incredible. That same year they had to wade in. And because blacks were not allowed to go out into Fort Lauderdale Beach and use the ocean there. They had a separate little beach for them. And what I found was so incredible was that the year that I was sworn into Congress, 50 years later, my 50th birthday, I was the representative of Fort Lauderdale Beach. So that only happens in America. And I think that that's what I want people to understand is the American dream, Dr. King's dream. That's the embodiment of what I am, that says that no matter where you're born, no matter where you come from, you can have whatever level of success and achievement that you want here. And it is truly about the pursuit of happiness and not someone trying to say that they can guarantee your happiness.
You also tell the story in your book about a black woman you had encountered on the campaign trail.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was interesting. I was up in Port St. Lucie, St. Lucie County, and it was quite interesting because she felt that I had somehow betrayed my race, the black people, because I was a conservative and I was a Republican. But if you go back and you read the writings and understand Booker T. Washington, who I call the first black conservative, he had 3 points. It was education, entrepreneurship, and self-reliance. And if we still had those 3 principles and those 3 foundations in the black community, I think you see a different black community. You wouldn't see what you see happening in Baltimore and Chicago. You would have more 2-parent households like I had with my own parents. And you've seen that breakdown of the family. So, it was quite interesting that she would see me as, the word is out there, the sellout. But I think that I've been true to the principles and values that my parents raised me with.
Ellen West, you write that today the hunt for the black conservative leads us to a metaphorical tree, but the end goal is still death, career death.
Well, it's very interesting that recently you just had George Takei, who was a gay activist, and the thing that he said about Justice Clarence Thomas was absolutely horrible and despicable, to say that he was a clown in blackface. And so if this is the means by which people are going to disparage and attack and seek to undermine black conservatism and black conservatives, this is not something new. This is not something odd, but I think it is something that is threatening to people that want to have a political hold on the black community. We need to have those varying voices in the black community. I always tell folks that if you're going to invest money, you're going to diversify your investment. But if you are the black community, why would you put all of your political investment into one party? That party will eventually take you for granted, and the other party will not even consider you and see you as irrelevant. So I think it's important that we go back and talk about principles and values. 50 years ago, with the Great Society programs of Lyndon Johnson, one of the things that he brought forth was to say that any woman that had a child out of wedlock, and as long as she did not have a man out of the home, the government would continue to provide her a check. 50 years ago, two-parent households in the black community was close to 77%. Today, it's 25%. Now, if me standing up and bringing something like that out makes me a sellout, I'm proud to be called that.
Are there more black conservatives than is let on or seems to be?
Absolutely.
In your view?
Absolutely. It's so interesting when I travel all across the country and you go through the airports. As a matter of fact, when I was flying out here from Dallas in Love Field, one of the gentlemen that was helping a woman, the wheelchair service, he knew exactly who I was. He knew exactly what I stood for. He said, thank you, because there are a lot of us out here, and you're a voice for us. Because it's about principle. It's not so much about party, but as the book talks about, it's about faith, it's about family, it's about freedom. It's about, as Booker T. Washington said, quality education, which opens up so many doors. It's about self-reliance and not dependency. And it's about, entrepreneurship. When I grew up and I walked down Auburn Avenue from school to go to Butler Street YMCA, I saw black professional officers. I saw doctors, I saw lawyers, I saw small business, ownership. But you don't see that anymore on Auburn Avenue, which was the cradle of black entrepreneurial development there in Atlanta, Georgia. That's what we need to restore. But instead, when you wake up today, look at what happened in Chicago over the weekend. 10, young black men murdered, a 7-year-old black child murdered, 55 wounded. Look at Baltimore, what is going on. Look at Detroit. It shouldn't be that way.
The day we're taping this is the day that South Carolina took the Confederate flag down from their state capital.
I think that's interesting, and I think that Governor Nikki Haley took the right approach. They brought it up at that state, and not about all the other external actors coming in and trying to manipulate it. But what we really need to do is not focus on whether or not you have a Confederate flag on the General Lee and that the Dukes of Hazzard needs to be pulled off the television. What we need to focus on is how do we strengthen those inner city communities. What happened in Charleston, South Carolina was absolutely horrible. There was a racist sociopath, and what he did was heinous and despicable. But I do not think that we need to take that to the level to say that America is a racist nation. I think that state and Georgia did the same, to look and say, do we really need to have a resemblance of that flag? And they changed it. But for people to try to manipulate this and to turn it, as I'll be very honest, Rahm Emanuel once said, never let a good crisis go to waste, we need to focus on the real crisis in America. And that's the degradation of the quality of life in the inner cities.
When you were in Congress, were you a member of the Congressional Black Caucus? Were you
Absolutely.
invited to join?
Well, I remember when I joined the Congressional Black Caucus and people asked me, well, how can you do that? And I said, well, as far as I know, there are only 2 qualifying criteria. You're a member of Congress and you're black, so I'm in. And it was quite interesting. But, the funny thing was, John Lewis, the civil rights icon, John Lewis had come down to South Florida to campaign against me, had no idea, no clue about my background. John Lewis was my congressional representative growing up in Atlanta. And when I met him at the swearing-in ceremony, and I said, Mr. Lewis, it's an honor to meet you. I told him about graduating from Grady High School. I told him about my parents, out and campaigning for him. He was absolutely shocked. And so I think that we need to have those varying voices so that we don't become polarized, so that we do get to hear other perspectives, because I want to restore the greatness of the black community in the inner city, that vision that Booker T. Washington had when he discovered Tuskegee Institute.
Congressman West, you spend quite a bit of time on philosophers in your book. Who's your favorite, or which ones do you admire?
Well, I will tell you without a doubt, I think that John Locke, who is the classical liberal philosopher who came up with the understanding of natural rights theory as opposed to divine rights theory, that says that each and every person has a connection to their creator God, and that they have these individual rights of life, liberty, and property, as he called it. And then, of course, we just celebrated 239 years of what I think is one of the greatest documents that the world has ever known, the Declaration of Independence. And Jefferson took the words and the thoughts of John Locke and said that, here in America, the individual has those inalienable rights endowed from the Creator of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I think that is what makes this country so great, so exceptional.
R-O-N-I-N, Ronin. It's a
Yes.
word you see often in your book. What is it?
Well, it's very interesting because, you know, the Ronin is the quote-unquote disgraced samurai who no longer has a master. And I kind of see it as a Ronin in myself, and that most people believe that as a young black man, you're supposed to follow a certain path. Well, my path is not about serving a particular master. It's about serving a core set of principles and ideas. And as I always say, that's what my sword is drawn for. And it was so humbling when an actual samurai master from California flew to Washington, D.C., and presented me with a samurai sword that I have on display in my home.
You thank Dana Perino in this book.
Yes, I do, because...
What's your connection to Dana Perino?
Well, you know, I'm a Fox News contributor, and so on occasion when I go up to New York City, I get a chance to see Dana. But Dana emailed me and told me that I had a story that needed to be told. And she's a tough little cookie, and she's a hard person to say no to. And so I wrote this book, and I was just so pleased and honored, not for myself, but really as a testimony to my parents.
What are you doing here at Freedom Fest in Las Vegas?
Well, as the president and CEO of National Center for Policy Analysis, I was invited to be here. I gave a speech Wednesday evening as an opening speech, and I'm on several different panels throughout the rest of the week.
Finally, let's bring up one more controversial issue, and that's your choice of a motorcycle. That's not a Harley in this picture.
No, it's a 2005 Honda VTX 1800. That's the November series. And I got to tell you something. If anyone were to get on that bike with the fuel injection and the shaft drive, it is one of the most smooth rides that you will ever find. And most of the Harley people don't mind me pulling up and riding with them because it has a ton of power.
How often do you ride?
As a matter of fact, this past Sunday, I got out with a bunch of reserve component soldiers, National Guard guys back in Dallas, Texas, and we went out and had a little barbecue. So I try to get out, you know, every other weekend if I can.
Allen West, former congressman, author, and now think tank president, Guardian of the Republic, is the name of the book. Here's the cover. This is Book TV on C-SPAN 2.